So there we go. We have to understand that Ajahn Chah, first off, was talking to a particular group of people, and it happened to have gotten recorded in possibly Thai language, because he didn't really speak much English. And so we got translated, and that each step along the way is a little bit different, more and more so. By the time that you've got that written down in a book in Vancouver, then had you been sitting in front of Ajahn Chah listening to what he was saying at the time.
Yeah.
Okay, different situation. And so in that regard, it looks like that you were kind of applying what I had mentioned about the way that the Buddha saw things, and then trying to apply Ajahn Chah's words to that. And this is what I'm talking about. You're using as if that statement of "Aha, I see you, Myra." You change that to "Aha, I see that this is impermanent."
Yeah.
Okay.
I sat down and I meditated. The past few days when I've been reading this, like I've just been doing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and when it makes any sense to me, not self. That one is still a little bit esoteric. And then noticing clinging, aversion, and anyway, so that's where my meditations have been going. But I don't really have strong concentration yet and stuff. So blah blah blah.
Okay. The Trilokana that you just mentioned, which is Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. It has some value, but it has value not in the way that you're applying it.
Okay.
Okay. And the way that you're applying it, you're not cheering yourself up. You're getting angry because you're not cheering up. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's some excitement in this. It's like, oh yeah, I see. But there's also some fear, and I try to remind myself, like, there's always good and bad. There's still going to be good and bad. I'm just not going to be fucked up about it.
Okay. Let's do, if we can, kind of both. And I'm not sure if we can mix them together very well. But let's go over the Trilokana so that you can get a kind of a perspective to it. There's a connection there that I think the students generally miss that can be helped by understanding the context that Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta are put in, and the context is Sabbe Sankara Anicca, Sabbe Sankara Dukkha, and Sabbe Dhamma Anatta.
Oh,
There's a change in there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
And when you understand that change, you can understand that this teaching is not a linear thing, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, but it's much more like Anicca. And once Anicca happens, you have a choice of either going in the direction of Dukkha, which means that there is something that suffers, or you can go to Anatta, which means there's nothing that can suffer.
Okay. And you said I heard Sangha.
Sabbe, Sankara, Anicca.
Uh,
Sabbe, Sankara, Dukkha, and Sabbe, Dhamma, Anatta.
what's Sabe?
So, Sabbe means everything or all, the whole show. All things that can fall apart will fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can also even go so far as to say that Sabbe uh, Sankara Nietzsche is a statement of Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And then the Sabbe uh, uh, Sankara Dukkha is actually the full statement then of Murphy's Law. Because Murphy's Law states anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it will go wrong at the worst possible time. Okay, and that Murphy's Law has back in the 1960s it came out of NASA, but it really did revolutionize computer science, especially in the sense of hardware.
Okay.
Okay, and that in fact you can even see the USB connectors are designed with Murphy's Law in mind. If you could plug a USB connector in upside down, you will.
Right.
And many people work really hard to try to get it in upside down and it won't go.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Make it.
then they realize, oh, I've got it upside down. And now I try to put it in and it will go. Okay, so this is the point then that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it'll go wrong at the worst possible moment. Many examples of that in reality. For instance, when does a rocket blow up?
When it's full of astronauts.
Right when it's taking off, and it's going to blow up when you've got a whole bunch of important teachers and cameras and everything on it. The worst possible moment, the Challenger blew up, and it just about destroyed NASA. Okay, so this is what we mean by it: is that anything that you attach to is going to change. And when it does change, you're going to have dukkha.
Yeah.
As long as you're attached to it. Now, here's something that's very interesting about change is that the human eye, the anatomy of the eye, is constructed to see change. Only we call it movement.
Mm-hmm.
An example is if you've got a dark floor, let
A
us
dark
say
what?
a dark floor, let us say a dark brown hardwood floor, which is what we've got here at the house. And you can have all kinds of tiny little animals that are just sitting there. But if you have a tick on the floor and that tick starts to crawl on the floor, even though the tick is dark and the floor is dark, you can see that tick because it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
If that tick is just sitting on the floor, you're not going to notice it.
Okay.
You can actually go looking for it and you won't see it. But if it's moving, now we can see it. Okay, so there is something about in the way that the human anatomy is that we can detect change.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually out looking for change because if things are the way that they actually are right now and they're static, then we have a feeling of safety. But if things start to change, now our safety is lost because we don't know what the future is going to bring.
Yeah, even the stupidest stuff. Like I have these earphones right now. Only one side works, and it's like I'll take them off to talk to somebody and put it back on, and the side that's on will be in the opposite ear, and it'll feel wrong. And then the next time I take it in the opposite ear, that feels wrong.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. So um, basically, there is a choice to be made, and that choice is: are we going to attach to the anicca, which is then going to cause dukkha, or are we not going to be attached to the nature? We can respond, we can behave, we can operate it, but we have to watch kind of how we feel. There is actually a sutta that I haven't mentioned to you. The sutta is number 87 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and the name of it is translated into grief comes from those who are dear. That's the name of it. Grief comes from those who are dear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it's mentioning those in the sense of other people, but anything that you get attached to will break. And when it does, you'll suffer. An example is the guy wants to go to work in the morning, the car won't start. He wants that car to start. He somehow or another, magically broken brain, wants to go to work. So when the car won't start, that's an anicca, because normally he's expecting it to start. Something unexpected has happened. And so examples of grief comes from those who are dear is like teenage sons argue with their dads. And that's grief for the dad. It's grief for the son, too. And yet, if they didn't even know each other, they probably wouldn't have this argument. It's only because they're dear to each other that they have so much grief. Or if the son or the father dies, now that's going to be big time grief, because we have a big time dear, or another way of calling it in English, they call it love. I like it in Australia. When I was there, everything was dear. When they say, oh, that's a pretty dress. And yes, it was dear, which means it cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the way that we look at it. And so using that quality of dear means that it has some value to us, and we hold on to that. And that's exactly what we do when we think of it in the English language expression of love.
Yeah.
That Christianity has been harping up the word love
Yeah.
for so many centuries that they think that it's got some value to it, where in fact, love causes grief. Why? Because we become attached to, and that attachment is the dearness, our love. For instance, when the young man says, I love you, please marry me, what the guy is actually saying is, my feeling is, I want to own you, lady. I
Yeah.
want to own you really, really bad, lady. When he says, I love you, oh, I love you, that means I want you. I
Yeah.
desire you.
And we want to be owned.
Because there's safety in that. That's part of the herding instinct. There's safety in numbers. And there's also the false delusion that I can get someone else to do my living for me.
I know that one well.
Okay. And we call that help. Please help me. Okay. And the Christians also really, really use that in the sense of you cannot help yourself. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And then in Romans, Paul goes so far as to say, good, who do you think you are good? Only God is good. Okay, so this is the mentality that they have that is around the issue of the magical job that if you take Jesus as your Savior, thou shalt be saved. And yet people do that ceremony. They take their baptism on Sunday night, and on Monday morning, they're back to doing all the sin that they were before. So that baptism ceremony does not save people from sin. But it is possible that someone can go into the baptism so fully on fire uh, with the devotion or whatever that he's on guard on Monday to make sure that he doesn't sin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's very, very rare, because the Christian method of teaching is that Jesus is going to do it for you, so that you don't have to put any effort into it at all. And therefore, the ceremony is empty, it's hollow, it makes no value to it. So, the idea then that we attach to things, we become dear to things, and that attachment then, when those things change, we start to feel bad. That's a normal sequence of events. Now, you could also you change the word dukkha from suffering into dissatisfaction. That's a much better word for it. It's unsatisfactory. Okay. So think about it this way. If some manufacturer of automobiles manufactured an automobile that was so good on gas that you probably never had to fill the tank up once the car was built. Not only that, but it never ran or it never broke down. It never got a scratch. Okay. We're talking about the kind of car that doesn't change. All right. Is there such a car?
Not that I know of.
Is that what the car salesman try to convince you?
I see where you're going. Yeah.
Well, you see where we're going with that. Okay, right. So, because the car is subject to change, it will get scratches. It does run out of gas. It does break down, but we don't want it to. So when it does run out of gas, we feel bad.
Yeah.
Have you ever run out of gas?
Emotionally, I don't drive, but yeah.
Okay, all right. Emotionally run out of gas. All right. But your emotionally run out of gas hasn't left you stranded out on a highway you don't know.
Oh no, it definitely has, quite literally.
Okay.
Drug addict problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, it was dearer to us to get to the destination, and the car decided to change by running out of gas. Before it was running down the road, it had enough gas to continue down the road, and then now it doesn't have enough gas to continue around the road, and it stopped. It changed.
Yeah.
And if we already have the feeling of the car should not run out of gas,
Yeah.
then because that point of view is dear to us, then when the car ran out of gas, we don't like it. But furthermore, getting to our destination was also dear to us, and now we can't do that because the gas is out, the car has changed. So basically, the emotional dukkha is because of attachment. But there's the other kind of dukkha that I was pointing out is that cars do change. They do fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
That car would have been really satisfactory only if it didn't run out of gas and didn't get scratches and didn't break down. So the car itself is manufactured unsatisfactorily, sometimes intentionally. The word is called planned obsolescence. Have you ever heard of that term?
Oh yeah, it's a source of real anger for me.
Okay, well, that's up to you.
But it's righteous anger.
How dare an imperfect factory build an imperfect car?
How dare this imperfect world be imperfect?
Precisely. And perfection doesn't even exist except in the mind as a concept.
Yeah.
And so that's it, in fact, that we have the concept that things should not change. Because if things do change, then it it requires some new behavior. A really easy example of that is the dance band is playing a fast number and the kids are really enjoying the fast dancing, and just immediately it takes and changes it to a slow number. And look how many kids leave the dance floor. All right, so that's the whole point, that we don't like change. We get attached to having things the way that they were. When we like something the way that it is, then we want and hope and expect it to be like that, because then our life is easy. What we like is here. And so long as what we like is here, we can like it and we feel good. But when what we like is broken, then we feel suffering.
Mm-hmm.
If we're attached to it, if we have some sort of clinging of I, me, or mine, okay, let us say that in your household, everyone had his own laptop, and that one of the guys that you know of but don't spend a lot of time with, he's got a laptop and you have a laptop. Now, let's say that both of those laptops broke on the same day. Which laptop do you pine about? Your laptop or his?
Mine.
Of course. That's the whole question, about that things are inherently unsatisfactory, and when they prove themselves to be unsatisfactory.
Hold on, there was a ding.
Pardon?
There was a ding. Just hold on a second.
Okay. So, if there is no self involved, if there is no owner, then there is no ownership. Okay. In the sense that the laptop is now the world, and I'm attached to that laptop. So when the laptop breaks, there's something within me that breaks. But if I am Lokatara, if I am above that laptop, when that laptop does not mean much of anything to me other than the value of the usefulness in that laptop, then the value and the usefulness of that laptop can be really easily replaced.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually keep a spare laptop.
So when we talk about not self, is it just not treating anything at all, including the body and the thoughts and the rest of it, as worthy of attaching to?
Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has a phrase that's quite famous. And he gets this right out of the sutras. It's a sutra quote, but I don't know exactly where it is. And it goes like this: nothing is worth attaching to as I, me, or mine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are ways of attaching to things that are not I, me, or mine if we're attaching to what we would call noble things. An example of that is attaching ourselves to the present moment, because there's always a present moment. We can always attach ourselves to the present moment. This present moment is noble. This present moment existed in the time of the Buddha. It existed the day you were born. It exists right now, and it's going to exist the day that you die. And then after that, the present moment is always here. And so attaching to the present moment is actually a very good thing to do.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Be Here Now when he says, like if right now is not good, then everything's a travesty.
Mm-hmm. Because that's all there really is. The past is gone. It no longer exists. But what does exist is the mental habits that we built up in the past so that we keep going down that way. For instance, a path down in the woods, let's say for a dual path for like a carriageway. If that carriageway keeps getting used, let us say the old pickup truck keeps going down that dirt road, it's going to start, the dirt road's going to change. It's going to start forming ruts. But also, if that truck stops going down that road, in fact, because he's avoiding ruts, he might even, in fact, start using another pathway altogether, which means now those old ruts are going to get filled in. It's going to rain. There's going to be grass growing. And pretty soon you may not even be able to see that there used to be a road here.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything changes. But if that rut forms and the driver of the truck gets stuck in that rut, now he's going to be in dukkha. That's unsatisfactory for him. Okay, so we have to understand that everything about the experience of unsatisfactoriness has to do with our attachment, and that nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. Which brings us back to the present moment. If you're attached to the present moment, you're not attached to it as an I, me, or mine. You can't, no one would go so far as to say, this moment is mine.
I've heard those words. This world is mine, this moment is mine, but okay, I mean let's talk about that. I I have the thought, I'm always experiencing the world from behind my skull. My experience, from the personal point of view, everything around me, everything I experience is just in terms of the subjective experience, is planets orbiting me. They're not orbiting me, but it feels that way. Like this is my experience is just my experience. I can never have a God's eye view. I can never have your experience. I'm never going to live anybody else's life. Now, on the other hand, I don't control any of it. I hardly have any control over myself. So
So far, that in fact, if you can think of it like that, that's actually the job. That's one's right effort, is to take control. Because most people's lives are out of control. And the reason that they're out of control is because the habits are in control. It's very much like a modern commercial airliner that has an autopilot. That the autopilot, when the autopilot is on, it's going to keep the plane going in a certain heading. It's going to keep it at a certain attitude. It's going to have pitch and yaw and all of that kind of stuff taken care of by the automatic pilot. The problem with the automatic pilot is the automatic pilot can't see storms, and it can't see that mountain in front of us, and it can't see the other aircraft we're about to hit. Automatic pilot may be useful, but it's dangerous because it's blind. Okay. We also have an automatic pilot, and that automatic pilot is our instincts. We live instinctually often rather than look at what we're doing and look at where we're going. But there's a certain amount of effort that the pilot, when he turns the automatic pilot off, now he actually has to fly the plane. And it takes effort to fly the plane. He's got to keep the yaw and the pitch and the attitude and the heading, as well as making maneuvers to get around whatever that the automatic pilot was about to run him into. Okay, so we can think of that that's the actual practice of anapanasati, is to wake up the pilot and have him take his pilot seat, turn the automatic pilot off, and start flying the airplane all by himself.
Yeah.
And then when it's safe, we can put it back on automatic pilot. And then most people live almost their whole lives on automatic pilot. which means that they're easily manipulatable. If someone is prone to anger, then we can manipulate him through his anger. If someone is prone to fear, then the politicians can manipulate his vote because one politician is going to make him afraid of the other politician. Okay? And in fact, that's how it works in voting. I think this is worldwide, but it's certainly very easy to see in the United States. There's only two motivations for voting. You either lie to the voters to tell them how bad things are and that they better vote for me because things are going to hell in a handcart if you don't vote for me. And then the other one, the other politician is saying, oh, vote for me and I'll give you all kinds of goodies. So voting is actually controlled by greed and ill will and ignorance. Okay, the ignorance is that the voter doesn't know he's being lied to. And so he's being manipulated either through his greed or his ignorance. So voting is in fact a very classical view of, or I'm taking classical view of the second noble truth. So we are manipulated by our feelings. The whole society's job is to manipulate your feelings. They can't sell a car without manipulating your feelings. Very few cars are sold for transportation. Even the cars that a police force would buy. Why? Because the guy, the purchasing agent, is going to be buttered up, lied to by the car salesman, but now they're trying to sell a whole fleet of cars. But it's still the same sales job. The question is, can you be sold anything? The answer is, on automatic pilot, you'll always buy it. But when you're thinking, when you're actually considering it, you may choose wisely, so long as you're not choosing according to how you feel. So often enough, when a mom and a daughter goes shopping, the daughter is going by her feelings and wanting clothes that she likes, to where her mom is thinking much more practically. So this is a way of understanding that we have a dual nature inside. We have a human nature that can actually look and think and see. And then we have an instinctual, more primitive system that is based in the past. And that when we're children, that frontal cortex is not very well woken up. That in fact, it's possible for even educated people going through the educational process in England or US or Canada and grow up as an adult and never bother to ever come out of their instinctual behavior. They just live from one instinct to the next. We can call that kind of guy a good old boy. The rednecks, the ones who operate out of their own feelings. And that part of the delusion that they have is that they'll be saved, they can get away with it, that they'll get God's forgiveness, so they can go do anything they want to, including continuing their hatred of other people, because they'll get forgiveness. They can get away with it. Wrong view, causing themselves and everyone around them a great deal of suffering. And these people are easily manipulated because they're not really looking at, they're not waking up. So this is what we mean by Anicca Dukkha. Anything that's stuck together is going to fall apart. So anything that is stuck together is inherently unsatisfactory. And when we bring the self into it, then that means that we're attached to it, and it's going to change. It's going to rot. Just like Ajahn Chah said, that everything is like a piece of glass, subject to getting broken. Everything breaks. That should actually not be a disappointment or a travesty because you already know that it's true. But the way that we're putting it should feel liberating. Oh, I don't have to suffer if I'm not attached to it. I can either go from Anicca to Anatta, or I can go from Anicca to Dukkha. My choice. Does that make a little more sense to you?
It does. I imagine it's going to take some effort and some training, and I'm. So I mean, I guess like with this whole aha training that you have, I can say, aha, I don't have to be attached to it.
Mm-hmm. Aha, this is not mine. This is not me. I am not this. Because when we are fully attached to it, that means that we become it. Here's an example. Look at my arm here. You see that part of the arm and this part of the arm? This is the world. And now attachment, right? Look at the fact that there's the other end of the arm there. What does that mean? That means when there is an attachment, there is an attachor. When there is clinging, there is a clingor.
1 second, please.
When there is an owner, when there is ownership, when there is owning, then there is an owner.
There's a glimmer.
The owner is the one who suffers.
Mm-hmm.
The owner is the one who experiences the dukkha. If there is no owner, then there is nothing to suffer. That's exactly what the philosopher teachers ask their philosophy students. If the tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? If there's no one there to hear it. I'd really, really love for a philosophy professor to ask me that question. I'll tear him apart.
Would you?
Yeah, because the idea is if there is no one to hear the sound, then there is no sound. But in fact, the word sound has to do with air vibrating according to a frequency or a set of frequencies. When that tree falls, that frequency of the thud, when that tree hits, it's not going to just make a sound when it actually lands when it falls. It's going to be making a whole lot of noise the whole process. As it falls, it's going to rub against other trees, and those trees are going to be affected. The birds are going to know it. The birds can hear that stuff. All of the animals will run out of the way. Even the worms will know when that tree falls. There is sound. Even if there were no birds and no other trees and no other worms or anything like that, there is still that sound vibration, even if there's nothing to hear it. So the philosopher, when he asks that question, he's making a distinction that needs to be inspected, because the word noise would be a better one. If the tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Is a different question than if the tree falls in the woods, does it make a noise? Why? Because the word noise is actually a judgment.
Yeah.
Okay, and that means that you've got to have someone in there judging. And maybe the guy wants the tree to fall, so he likes it. And then someone else, maybe a tree hugger, he sees or hears the tree falling, and he doesn't like it. So that's the other question. When the tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound or does it make a noise? And the other question is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? All of that is always subjective based upon the observer, or in our case, the hard observer, which is the owner. And the owner always is affected by what he owns. And what he owns is always temporary. And when he breaks, the owner suffers. But if there is no one to own that tree when it falls naturally in the woods, then it makes a sound, but it doesn't make any noise.
Yeah. So it can feel like a word game. Because
in a way it is. In a way it is. And the word game that you learned to play, you learned as a child. And you wind up, when you play that game, you wind up in good or bad feelings. Generally bad. So when you wake up to the fact that you're playing a word game, then you begin to get very, very careful about your definitions of words. As you've probably been able to tell over the time that you've been with me, I'm very careful about defining words.
Mm-hmm. Because the phrase that I hear is more along the lines, it's not like nothing is self, but like nothing is worthy of being what you attach to as self.
Exactly. So when that's exactly the word, in fact, that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is using. Nothing is worth attaching to as I, me, or mine, because if you do attach to it as it belongs to me, I'm attaching it to it as I'm the owner of it, then I'm going to have grief. I'm going to be disappointed when I lose it.
Because when I've been trying to explore not self, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about interconnectedness, like this thing doesn't exist, in my mind without the thing that I'm looking at. It's always going in and out. I really have very limited control over the whole thing. There's nothing that I can contemplate that isn't something, that's outside of me. That's what I've been thinking about with not self. Is that worthwhile or?
Well, it's possibly a good idea for us to continue to talk about that, and we possibly can only do a bit of it on this call, and we'll finish more of it later. Okay. But yeah, in the Trilokana, we're actually looking at that third element is Anatta, or who am I? That basically winds up being that question of who am I? And the big mistake that everyone makes is I am this personality. Now, what is personality? The personality is all of the old memories of thoughts, old memories of concepts, old memories of language, old memories of ways of doing things, old memories that we started building up in childhood. And so our thoughts and our feelings are these things that build up personality. But there's also other aspects of personality. Your body itself is part of your personality. For instance, the ugly fat girl has a different kind of personality based upon the beauty queen as an example of different. They have a slightly different personality. In fact, possibly quite a major personality. That the beauty queen is quite happy to dance and show off in front of everybody. Look at me, how beautiful I am. And the fat ugly girl is very shy about showing off and dancing in public and whatnot like that. Okay, so the body itself has a tremendous quality of who we are. Those people who have a masculine body will automatically have traits that are generally different enough to where it can be seen. It's so easily seen that they even dress boys differently than girls, and in some cases put them in different classrooms and teach them different things. So there's many aspects of the body that build into the personality, which means that then over time, when the body begins to change, then the personality changes also. So that the personality of a 70-year-old is generally going to be different than the personality of that same guy when he was 40.
Yeah.
Because now his body is changing, it's getting old, and he knows it, and he doesn't like it. When he had it when he was 40, he didn't have those kind of thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Okay. He may, in fact, never have gone to the doctor. He was able to successfully avoid going to doctor until he gets old, and now he's in the doctor's office once a month or maybe once a week. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that happen with the body. There's also the way that we feel is determining our personality. Not only do we say, I am angry or I am sad, but some people tend to have those same feelings memorized and practiced often, so that some people wind up being angry a lot of their time.
Yeah.
Other people are sad a lot of their time. So personality and the way that we feel, our old past, and the way that we process data, our perception, is also part of our personality. Now let's go and look at the body actually as a body, and we recognize, wait a minute, I am not the body. I can't make it big. I can't make it small. I can't choose what age I am. I am not the body.
I'm
The
writing.
body is part of the personality. And I then think I am me or I am the personality. So you can see how we make those kind of mistakes. We also recognize that that I am not the feelings because I can't control the feelings. When I am angry and recognize that I'm angry, and that's actually hard to do because mostly when people are angry, they'll deny it even if you accuse them of being angry.
I'm not denying it.
Mm-hmm. So even if the guy can see he's angry, it's really a little hard for him to move out of anger right into being happy, which means that the anger controls him. That's why we say, I am angry, when in fact, no, there is just anger there. And so by identifying with our feelings, identifying with the body, identifying with personality, we continue to identify with it over and over again. And then we get up the idea that I am, because I continuously identify.
So does this whole business go down to what we can control, you know?
Well, let's get to that a little bit later, because there are some things that you can control and some things that you can't control.
Yeah.
And when you figure out what you can control and what you can't control, then you begin to choose what you will control and what you want control. So that if you can figure out what the right thing to control is, then you'll have a happy life.
It's what we teach it's what they teach in the 12 steps.
Uh-huh. You got to figure out what controls you do have and develop them as skills. That learning how to control the way you feel is a skill to be developed. But you have to learn to be able to separate yourself from the feelings, because when I am sad, I can't control it.
Yeah.
When I am angry, I can't control it. But when I can say, I see you, anger, then we separate out. And I am no longer the anger. I'm the one who sees the anger.
Because I am having that more and more with meditation. That feels, my head is feeling more and more like a stage on which stuff happens.
Great.
Yeah.
You and Shakespeare are going to get along really well together.
I like that. And
All the world's a stage and everyone's a player.
I, like, I remember briefly looking at the Yoga Sutras, and they were talking about the watcher. Do we identify with the watcher? We don't identify at all. I don't know. What do we do?
I don't understand.
I can sense this sense of, something behind all this watching, or a stage on which all this is happening.
Oh, you used the word watching. Okay, I heard the word water, and that's why it didn't make any sense to me. Okay, sorry. Ears don't work so well. They're not my ears. They're just, these are the ones that are here. They don't work too well. So, in fact, with that concept of water, we might as well think I am water, because the human body is more than 80% water.
Yep, absolutely.
But we rarely make that mistake. It's kind of hard to see the water.
Well, and the nice thing about water is that it comes into us, it leaves us. It's dinosaurs pissed it, and somebody in the future is going to drink it. The water isn't me, but I'm 86% water.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we don't identify with water. But go back with that stuff about watching again, and let me put it back into context.
You'd like me to repeat myself?
Yeah, please repeat yourself.
Yeah. I have this sense of, there's all this stuff going on, and then there's something beneath it watching, or there's all this stuff happening, and there's a stage on which it's happening. Ajahn Chah talks about mind and phenomena are two separate things. We get attached to phenomena, but actually, he says, the mind is the most happy, comfortable thing.
Okay. It is when it's only the mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that?
No. No.
Okay. At certain times of year, generally Halloween, the kids will go out and throw toilet paper in the trees and egg cars and things like that. Okay. So imagine that the mind is like the car, and the car is just the car. But on this particular day, the car has been egged.
Yeah.
Okay, now that the car is egged, it's not just a car, it's an egged car.
Yeah.
We normally see our mind as not just the mind, we see it as an egged mind. And so it's hard to understand when Ajahn Chah is saying that kind of stuff, but he's talking about just the mind, not the mind full of crap.
Intellectually, I think I understand it, but
Well, then go visit that place. Go find it. Go find that third noble truth.
help.
Go looking for it, in the sense of, is this it yet? Yeah, this is feeling pretty good. I don't feel suffering right now. I can actually feel. Okay, so this is the way that we begin to experience it. Don't get too hung up on there is only dukkha, but to the point that when there is no attachment to anything, there is no self to suffer. Only a self can suffer in this way. Only the self defines things as unsatisfactory because the self is not getting what it wants. The point is that this self is temporary. It arises and it changes. To where religions have tried to give us the concept that the self is permanent.
Yeah.
It's everlasting. That even after you die, there's going to be that self. To be reborn into heaven or hell. Okay, so that's the kind of point that the Buddha is making. In fact, it possibly would have been a better Western Buddhism if the original translators had not translated anatta as no self and instead had translated as no soul.
Because this no self business sounds really fucky.
Well, we've been trained to think that there is an identification or a self or an inherent me in there. And it is very difficult for people to recognize that what you have always thought of as me has, in fact, been a process all along, and there never was an inherent, deep natured you. Who you were when you were 3 years old was not who you were when you were 6 years old. Your personality had changed. Who you were at the age of 12 now is completely different than a 6-year-old.
Yeah, so are we saying that I'm never the same person? And I definitely get like who I am has all these inflows and outflows, and it's so dependent on context and food and um, social move. All these things flow in and out of it. It doesn't exist on its own. That feels really vivid to me, and I can grok the idea that it's always changing, and
Well,
so
think of yourself as kind of
I feel
a
that.
vessel like a pot or something,
Yeah,
and that things go into the pot
yeah,
and things go out of the pot.
yeah.
And sometimes we get a new pot. And so everything changes. The pot changes and all the stuff in the pot changes, but we still identify as that pot is me, and everything in it is me.
Yeah, I mean, self as vessel, things coming in and out. Feel that. The pot changing, like the
You are not the same pot as a 3-year-old pot. The pot will change over time. The pot is a new pot, then the pot's an old pot, then the pot is a broken pot. Maybe
and
the
yet
pot's been mended, okay, but the pot's changing too.
there's a lot of continuity, though, quite a lot of continuity.
That continuity then is the continuity that becomes the delusion that the continuity is somehow permanent when it's not. Everything is temporary. There may be some continuity, but do not confuse continuity with permanence.
Sure.
That's the teaching. Because if you get attached to something, it's going to change, it's going to break, and you're going to feel bad. How bad are you going to feel? It depends upon how attached you were to it. How dear was it? If it's not too dear, then you can be okay. But if it was dear to you and you lose it, then you will be in grief.
Um, if we could pause for a moment, it's just things are coming together. Yeah, because I mean, I actually like this time in my recovery, addiction. Like every day is exactly the same. I've phrased in my addiction that there's been years that have felt like the same day, and I don't even mean the same day again and again, just like one fucking long day. And the suffering in my recovery has been very predictable, very cheesy. But the um, the breakthroughs, um, have been so surprising. And in all sorts of wonderful different shades, from ecstasy or the more frequent, oh shit, really? And these surprises are really quite nice. I'm really in a point where like I'm enjoying my mutability. I'm enjoying that I can change. Um,
Well,
you
that's
know,
the whole point. That's what you've been practicing on, is gladdening the mind, cheering up,
yeah,
deciding that you can change.
yeah,
What a marvelous thing that is that you've done, is you've made a change from thinking that change is really hard and I'm addicted and I need help from the 12-step program and poor me, etc., like that. And you begin to change your attitude completely now. And remember that attitude is a part of the Eightfold Noble Path. The changing of the attitude from the loser that you were, that was the addict, into the champion that you are, that you call recovering. That word recovering, by the way, is a very interesting one.
Yes, it is.
Possibly a way of looking at it is I'm a recovering recoverer.
Oh, shit. I like this. Go on.
Okay. Because when you're recovering from something, that means that you feel like that you're still trying to escape from it. But when you're a recovering recoverer, that means that now you have completely escaped from it. And that now you're escaping from trying to escape from something. So now the first thing is that we escape, and then we give up escaping. Or as they say, a thorn to remove a thorn. So when you get over being recovering, then you're completely recovered. And that, when you come to the point of, wow, isn't it great to be free from that stuff?
Okay, so I have no idea if this has any validity to Buddhism or not, but it's bringing up a debate that you hear in the nomenclature of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's meetings that are usually very testosterone filled, that people introduce themselves as recovered alcoholics, and they point to the fact that in the preface to the first edition of the Big Book, it begins with, "We are 100 men and women who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body," and then there's everybody who has any sense to them that knows that elsewhere it says, "We have but a daily reprieve, contingent maintenance of our spiritual condition, and you never safely drink again." And yet in Buddhism, I've heard people say, like, when you get it, you're good. You can't go back. So different things altogether.
Let's put it this way. Back in the 1970s, studying psychology, this question was actually something that was on the mind of people. I think partially because of the jealousy, because the psychologists weren't up to the 12-step program. The psychologists could not get as good a success rate.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question then comes around is that if someone recovers from alcoholism, can he come back and then become a social drinker?
No. No.
Why not?
Experience proves.
Yeah, but you're a young man now. You don't know what it's going to be like 50 years from now when somebody offers you a drink at a wedding for a toast, and you're going to make a scene, "Oh, I'm a recovering alcoholic," and you've been 50 years without a drink?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't have 80 years of experience, but people who have been around this whole time say, it doesn't matter how long you take away from the drink. It doesn't matter what skills, when you have this wiring, you cannot drink safely. Now, there are people that...
Well, that's a good warning in general.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about how they teach it, because generally they're still in the idea of recovery. here's something that I will tell you is that alcohol, as an example of is beer. Beer tastes terrible. Why would anybody want to drink a beer, especially the stuff that they sell in the West? Ah! Who would want to drink that stuff? The answer is that if you're actually tasting what it is that you're drinking,
Yeah.
that should be sufficient enough. So we're talking about, again, wisdom, to actually experience what you're drinking rather than that beer is handed to you and you've got all of this pre-programming about, oh, I've been an alcoholic and I shouldn't be doing this and it's a bad thing for that.
Yeah.
You see, that still now becomes part of the past that you're bringing to the present. But the actual present moment is, I'm not going to drink this beer, or I'm not even going to drink all of it because the first sip I had of it tasted terrible. Why would I drink any more of this stuff?
I see the point you're making. I'd like to offer my perspective in the way of a word of caution. A better metaphor might be cigarettes, because the same thing applies about the taste once you've quit. The reason why is that if you talk to a recovering person, you might put the wrong idea in their head. If you're talking about, you might be able to one day be able to drink. I see what you're saying about getting more in tune with the experience, but you could potentially put a vulnerable person's head sideways.
Well, they're still in the state of recovering, and I agree with that. But do they stay in that state of recovering, or do they ever actually fully recover?
People, I know people with 50 years sober who are on their deathbed. So that's a success. That's as successful as you could get. Could he, does he drink? No. If he asked for a drink on his deathbed, would I give it to him? Probably. But
is he likely to ask for a drink on his deathbed? Unlikely.
You know who did ask for a drink on their deathbed? Bill Wilson, the founder of AA.
Oh, really? Well, he said he had an axe to grind, though. But tell me the story.
Let's take a little tangent. Bill Wilson put together this amazing program that has saved many people. It's changing my life. I love it to bits. I read the things.
Is this the guy back in the late 1800s?
1933 is when Bill Wilson got sober. 1935, big book. 1938.
Okay.
When I read the stuff he's written, it now that I can wrap my head around it and I'm not getting hung up on the God word and just about the processes, it's money. It is so good. He's such a good writer, deep spiritual insight, and he was indefatigable, just absolutely a saint. And then in 1950, there was a world conference, and it was AA Comes of Age, and they didn't need him anymore. And he went into a few decades of depression. He tried LSD to get over his depression back in the day when it was more of a medical thing. And he said, yes, I think this could really help alcoholics. He smoked like a chimney. His wife tried to get him to quit, but he'd go on long walks where he'd just smoke and smoke and smoke. And he had an affair. And yes, the story goes that on his deathbed, he... I don't know whether he was of sound mind or not. I don't know what he died of off the top of my head, but the story goes that he asked for a drink. If you want, I can come back with the full story.
Okay. No, you've given me quite a lot. Yeah. In fact, though I'm not actually trying to make a statement about addictive personalities, but rather just say that term has been used before. And so I'm using it now just in reference to the fact that it's been used before without actually believing that it exists. Okay. Or another way of saying it, that everyone has an addictive personality.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Or that's another way of saying it. But right now, let's say that no, some people have addictive personalities more than others.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, he was addicted to alcohol. And when he put the AA together, he was actually able to cure himself of alcoholism. But then AA itself became his addiction. And when AA was taken away from him because of the organization and whatnot, that's when the addiction turned to smoking cigarettes and depression.
Mhm.
In other words, when he cured himself of alcoholism, he did not cure himself of addictive personality disorder.
You, it almost, the way you phrase it, it almost sounds like you're saying he became addicted to depression. Is that your intention?
Or let us say, addicted to the moment by moment feelings that depression brings on.
I know about the addiction, like the how compelling. Yeah, because those feelings, they get me to shut down and hide from things that feel horrible.
Hmm. Avoidance, right?
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a fear.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so what we're doing here with the practice of the Dhamma is that we're not attacking alcoholism or any particular ism.
Yeah.
We're actually attacking the part of the brain that is addictive, that does the addiction. And what is the addiction? The clinging. So they cling to alcohol, and after that, then they cling to the organization of AA, and I can see that. A
Yeah.
lot of people are clinging to the organization.
Yeah.
Some people actually will cling to their sitting meditation group. That's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and after this guy then clung to his organization, when he lost control of the organization, he
Yeah.
still was clinging to things.
Okay, so this is a tangent, but before I forget it, something important that I heard, speaking of organizations and clinging. Um, Two people were talking about Buddhism and people that are into meditation and the Dhamma, and in a casual way. And oh, was that pride? Excuse me. Um, um, and let me open a window. Um, and they were talking about going to a temple, and somebody said something that I think might be of interest to you. They said, I don't really like going to temples. I don't like all these robes and gold. Isn't this what the Buddha left the palaces to escape? I know that story is fishy, but I thought you might be interested to know that this was somebody's perception.
Uh, well, the history of the robes is that they took a rag cloth. There is actually one particular stripe in the robe, and by the way, um, since basically day one, when Ananda was sitting on the side of a hill with the Buddha said, "Isn't it magnificent to see this valley below? It is agricultural. There are roads, there are rice paddies, there are things like that." And Ananda had the idea that, yes, why don't we design the robes around that so that there is one long strip in the robe that does represent the road among these rice paddies, and there's square claws pieces, and there's rectangles, and all of it's the same. Even this, let us say, they also have different sizes of robes, and that the largest robe is 220 or 2.2 meters on its long side, to where children's robes will be smaller, but they all have the same design. And one of that road that's in there is generally cut from a piece of cloth that is charnel ground cloth. In other words, when the body is wrapped in this charnel ground clothing and dumped in the charnel ground, the bottom part of it is going to rot first. And so the monks will then go and take that piece of cloth off of the body and put it into their robes. If this guy knew that story, he wouldn't see the orange robes as something spectacular, because it's not. It's a representation of poverty.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm just communicating is that there's a perception that, you know, the pomp, the religiosity, the, you know, the religiousness of things, and you know, all of the theater and stuff might not be attractive to people, and in this moment where you're trying to connect Westerners to the temples. That was my takeaway. I'm just the messenger.
Okay. Those people who like that ceremony, they can find that at the temple.
Yeah.
But people who don't like the ceremony don't have to be involved with it.
Yeah.
And they can still be at the temple. You see, the Christian mentality is that everybody's got to be in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Within Buddhism, no. As in the issue basically is around chanting, because chanting is the time when they're doing most of the ceremony.
Yeah.
Many Asians like the ceremony. That's why the monks do the ceremony. The monks don't like doing the ceremony.
Right.
They don't like it so much, and many monks don't do it. Another point that we can say is that these ceremonies are only done in city temples.
Mm-hmm.
That forest watch generally not so much ceremony oriented. The forest watch is where the monks go to train their minds.
I think that you know, this
generally Westerners don't like the ceremony because they don't have a clue about what's going on, and they automatically reject it because they don't like feeling so stupid or ignorant, which is just a feeling. I don't know what's going on, therefore I don't like it.
I don't love chanting. Sometimes it's kind of relaxing, sometimes it feels kind of dumb.
Many monks don't chant. Others are unbelievably sophisticated at it. And I've lived with both kinds of monks before.
Yeah.
In fact, one monk that I lived with, Mahasamsak, was trained in chanting at Wat Po, which in Thailand, that's the number one place to learn all the chanting. Lower monks in Wat Po know more suttas in Pali language, memorize them.
Yeah.
So when I lived with him during Panza, I actually had to write a chanting book, so that I could keep up with them. But at Wat Suan Mok, never go to chant. In fact, the only monks that chant at Wat Suan Mok are generally visitors. All the people who live at Wat Suan Mok don't do any chanting at all. The whole point about the chanting was that we need to be able to communicate the teachings of the Buddha. And in places and times when paper and pencil and books were not available, they memorized the suttas. And after they memorized the suttas, then they became knowledgeable through understanding of what the actual sutta meant. But that only works when it's a native language.
Yeah.
Chanting in a foreign language, and you might be able to memorize every word, but as you're chanting it, all you hear is the sounds, and it has no meaning in it.
Well, it can
An example of that would be Iti Piso Bhagava Araha Samma Sambuddho Icha Charana. You know, you've heard that, right? But nobody knows anything about what it means.
Well, and it can draw people. Like there's Catholics that still go to churches that do the service in Latin because they like the mystery.
Exactly. Okay, so now you're saying that you're complaining about individual differences. Some people like that, and some people don't.
Yeah. I guess I have some level of, I'm somewhat on board because um, I get turned off too, and I guess in this moment of you're wanting connect the Westerners with the Asian Watts, and get the Western Sangha going together, but this definitely is not Asia. It's a new moment, and something fresh is well, it's certainly going to happen because that's the nature of things, but something fresh is called for.
Okay. But that doesn't mean that the Westerners have to only go to the temple when the temple is scheduling chanting.
Yeah, for sure.
That in fact, they may in fact be scheduling a meditation retreat time once a week. That's the time for the Westerner to go, not to go for the chanting. That in fact, the whole way of the ceremonies and the chanting in the West that the Buddhists do has had an enormous uphill struggle against the Christians who hate Buddhism.
Yeah.
You know why Christianity hates Buddhism?
Because they like to judge?
Actually, no, because the very heart of Buddhism destroys the very heart of Christianity. You see, the atheist and the Christians can argue and argue and argue and have for years over is there a God or not.
Yeah.
But to a good Buddhist with that Christian on stage in front of an audience, the Buddhist is going to confront them with, I don't care about God.
Yeah.
God is irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
Why is not God irrelevant to you? He doesn't help you. You don't see him. He doesn't walk into the room. He doesn't give you a beer. He doesn't do anything. Okay? There is no evidence that there's God exists, but we do accept that they do exist. But now we ask the question, well, so what?
Yeah. Yeah. I have this premonition of there's going to be some messiness in trying to forge what you're trying to forge, because there always is.
Well, yes and no, but we're kind of mixing things. Let's go back to the point that I was making about that Christianity has made sure that that kind of Buddhism has had a bad rap.
Okay.
They call it bowing and scraping,
Right.
the idols. Okay, right. They can see that it's idol worship.
Yeah.
All right, but the monks are not bowing and scraping to an idol. What they're doing is merely showing respect. It's an Asian form of showing respect. And you get that from me every time that we talk. I do this little ritual.
Yeah.
All right.
And I love it. I've actually started to end my meditation that way. I go like this.
Mm-hmm. So it's common in Thailand as a gesture. It actually beats shaking hands now with coronavirus.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Maybe we'll start bowing. Stranger things have happened. I'll start spreading that around. Maybe we should start bowing to each other. We can't shake hands. I like that. Ooh, I'd love it if we bowed. Just like a nice formal Scottish thing. I'm gonna try and make this happen.
Well, you can only make it happen with Devon. But yeah, sparks have that quality that when something's on fire, it gives off sparks. Those sparks float in the air, and all kinds of things get set on fire. So who knows? If you're wanting to spread something, though, it possibly would be better to spread joy rather than ceremonies.
Oh gosh, it would make me joyful. But yes, I'd like to spread joy. Absolutely.
Well, yeah. That's what mudita is all about. Metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha.
So sympathetic joy, empathetic joy.
Sympathetic joy. If you got joy, it resonates.
Yeah.
And people get into sympathy with it. When you're angry, you radiate anger. And people fall into sympathy with it. When someone's angry, they really want somebody else around them to be angry too. When somebody is in grief, then everybody around them grieves, except for perhaps one, the undertaker. He don't grieve. So joy, you can spread joy by having joy when you're overflowing with joy.
So with one thing that's happening right now is that my meditation practice is consistent in terms of I do it for an hour each day, but it's, as you and I have been exploring things, now I'm reading about Dhamma and stuff. Like I was working off the Mind Illuminated, which is tranquility meditation, and now this stuff about insight is drawing my attention. There was a while where I was suffering, where I was doing a lot of compassion stuff, and like the value of my meditation right now is like persistence. Like, okay, I can sit and breathe for an hour, and then I can go through my day in the same attitude. All I have to do is sit and breathe, and everything's going to come to me in its time.
You're missing a key ingredient.
Sorry?
You're missing the key ingredient. Where's the gladdening of the mind in this? Where's the joy? Where's the success?
Well, I mean, make no mistake. I'm doing every time that I come back.
I'm not making a mistake. I'm listening.
My apologies. Like when I meditate, I am practicing gladdening the mind every time that I come back. And sometimes it's more elaborate. I do the whole throwing out thing. And it is, bhavening me, it is going throughout the day. I don't have strong concentration or awareness growing.
We need to get into that. That's also another talk that we can have.
Okay.
But basically, the word concentration has snuck into Buddhism, and it doesn't belong. Under no circumstances are we ever actually using the word concentration with any of the things that we're doing. What we are actually doing, the Pali word that is translated into concentration wrongly, is the Pali word samadhi.
Absorption.
No. Samadhi means gathering together the factors.
Samadhi.
Gathering together the factors.
Samma.
So a physical example of that would be a Western American teepee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know what a teepee looks like?
I have some interesting stories about teepees. Go on.
Well, they are, let's say, treelings or limbs that are long, maybe 20, 30 feet, but not very fat around.
Yeah.
And that they are arranged in a structure like this, so that at the top, they all collect at a point, and then at the bottom, they are spread out to make the tent. That point at the top is a samadhi, where all of the poles gather together and support each other, so that one pole supports the other. If you only had one pole standing, you'd either have to put it firmly in the ground or it's going to fall over. You can put two poles together, and now those two poles in this kind of angle can't fall this way or that, but they can fall this way or that way.
Okay.
But if you put enough poles around, then at that samadhi point, when they're gathered together, all of the poles now work together and help each other for that structure to remain upright.
Are you talking about the factors of enlightenment?
No, I'm talking about the factors of enlightenment. I'm talking about the first jhana. I'm talking about anapanasati. I'm talking about a collected mind. I'm talking about a point that's in the Eightfold Noble Path. Sama samadhi is when the mind becomes organized or unified, rather than having all of these poles that are laying on the ground. So right now, every human being that you notice or meet will be kind of like a crowd. They're this way and they're that way, and they keep changing. Each individual one is a crowd.
Yeah.
But when one really has the Dhamma, they tend to be the same about all the time. They're laughing and joyful and quite still. They've got things organized.
Okay.
That's what the word samadhi means. It means to have it means to have your shit together. And most people, their shit's just scattered all over the place.
So
This is what the word samadhi means, and it's not a matter of concentration. It's a matter of collecting the factors together that are needed, which in this case is a collection of skills. What are the skills? The skill of right effort, the skill of remembering, of samadhi, the skill of having right attitude. The skill, most importantly, is of one's right view. When we have these skills together, the mind can become much more organized.
Okay.
And Anapanti is the way that we practice these skills. And as you recognize, I'm talking about the Eightfold Noble Path.
Yeah.
Okay. The Eightfold Noble Path, one of the steps or the end of the path is right noble samadhi, which means now the mind is organized, it's unified, and it's not a crowd.
Unification.
And that's not concentrated. We use the word concentrated in the English language in the sense of throwing out the extra and only get the core or the heart. An example of that would be concentrated milk or concentrated frozen orange juice.
Mm-hmm.
They merely take the water out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but in fact, if you really want orange juice, then you want orange juice with the water back in it. So you take it out of concentration form and put it into a samadhi form. You put all the constituent components back in there, and now you've got real orange juice. Concentration and samadhi are almost opposites. Let me give you another example. Have you ever seen a whack-a-mole toy or a whack-a-mole machine? And they, like in the arcade, you put money in it, okay? And they normally have, I think it's 5 by 5. So there's about 25 whack-a-moles or molds to whack, and they come up one at a time. Well, the kid who is playing this whack-a-mole game, he begins to figure out that center whack-a-mole comes up the most often. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'm going to concentrate on that one whack-a-mole, and anytime that whack-a-mole comes up, I'm going to be sure to get it. Mm-hmm. Guess what? He's going to miss the other 24 because he's concentrating. He's focused. He's missing things. Not only that, but his mom or his dad or his older brother could sneak up right behind him and jab him because he's not paying attention to what's going on. He's too focused on one whack-a-mole. Okay. So the awareness that we're building is the awareness of being here now, and the here now is enormous. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole lot of stuff to start paying attention to and to watch. But when we're concentrating, that means that we're taking things out and getting down to just one little thing. One of my examples is that the cavalry, the bluecoats, they're standing on a hill, and the guy's got his binoculars out, and he's watching the Indians down below, and he's watching intently. What are they doing? What are they doing? While a few of the Indians sneak up right behind him. He's not paying attention to what's going on around him. He's focused on something that's happening way over there. Well, that's exactly what people are doing most of their life. They're focusing on something inside the mind rather than paying attention to what's happening around them. So come out of concentration and come into samadhi. Wow, I know that's a little hard because you've heard concentration so many times when it comes to meditation.
Well, two things are coming up. One is that my brain is, as you're talking about this, is starting to think of samadhi as the entirety of the Dhamma and everything going around, and that's feeling a little bit overwhelming. And the other thing
Well, don't
is,
get overwhelmed with it. Just keep adding more tent poles, one at a time. The more tent poles you add, the more stable your tent's going to be.
I can work with that. The other thing is, this is really making me really curious about what is this thing, that I keep hearing about focusing on the breath. Where does this fit in? What am I supposed to be doing when I'm meditating exactly?
Well, we can go over Anapanasati again because everyone that I know of needs to hear it a half a dozen times. Over and over and over again. This stuff is, let us say, alien to our culture. And it's also alien to the way that the mind works. Alien in the sense of foreign. Alien in the sense of we're not used to it. Okay. But the word focus or concentration are English language words that have snuck into English language Buddhism, or what we normally call just Western Buddhism. There is no sutta ever where it says focus on the breath. It uses the word understand. To understand that this is a long, deep breath. To have enough sati to wake up to, or to make sure that this is a long, deep breath. A long in deep breath. And then another point of sati would be understanding that this is a long out breath. And so we only need to watch the breath 2 points within that breath. And that breath may be, as you practice more, you'll get down to 5 breaths a minute, then down to 4 breaths a minute, and then down to 3 breaths a minute. And in 3 breaths a minute, that means this breath took 20 seconds, which is basically something like the 8 seconds on an in breath, 8 seconds on an out breath, and then 4 seconds between the out breath and the in breath. So in 20 seconds time, that's a long, long, long time, 20 seconds. If you don't believe me, take a match, light it up, and hold your hand right on top of it for 20 seconds and see if that's not a long, long time. 20 seconds is a long time, and a lot can happen in that one in-breath and out-breath. Or never mind 20 seconds on 3 breaths a minute. Let's just take it at 5 breaths a minute and bring it down to a count of 12. So at 5 breaths a minute or 12 seconds, that's still a long, long time. Lots of stuff to happen. And all we're asking is to note that the breath, this is a long in-breath. You don't have to watch the whole long every point of the in-breath or every out breath. But we think that we do because of the word focus. We're not focusing on the breath. We're merely making sure that it's a long, deep, slow in-breath and a long, deep, slow out-breath. And this really does energize the body. You can actually feel the tingling. You become tingly alive. And so those are things to note. Anapanasati is actually a whole group of skills to be developed.
Yeah, like there's like 16 points in the sutta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, 14 of them have the verb to train, and only 2 of them have the verb to understand. And so when people focus on the breath, they think that they're training the breath. No, all we need to do is understand that it's a long, deep breath. And now we have other things to train. The most important training is sati. That's a skill to be developed. The skill of being able to look at the mind and see what's in the mind. Waking up. This is step 9 of Anapanasati, and it's a skill to be developed. And the skill that's to develop is not how sharp or strong your sati is, but rather how often does it occur. That's the skill that's being trained, is how often can you come back and wake up and come back and wake up and come back and wake up. And as you come back and wake up, part of what we're going to do is make sure that the breathing is a long, deep breath. But we're not going to focus on that. We've got a whole lot of other stuff to do.
So why, like, I'm confused because there's so much teaching and around, like in the Mind Illuminated, I think stage 6 is the whole of your consciousness is on the tip of your nose without any distractions happening at all, and without ever.
And the ninja's going to sneak right up in the room and stab you in the back while you're doing that.
Sure. On the other hand,
but if you're watching what you're doing and notice what you're going through, and when that ninja comes in the room, you're going to know he's there.
I have appreciated the more that I get aware in the present moment, the more that I can see what's there and work with it. And I love it. I love getting more and more clear awareness, focus on different things, the turning up the definition of things, which does seem to have something to do with the focus of attention. And it seems vital for my development as a human being to get more and more clear, present attention.
Right. Okay. I'm not against that at all. In fact, this is what we are talking about. But when you're overly focused and stuck focused on one thing, then you're going to miss other things.
Yeah.
Okay. And most of the time, people are overly focused on one sense organ and not the other 5.
Mm-hmm.
What is that one sense organ? That's the sense organ of the mind, okay, which means that we can think and we can process and we can conceptualize and we can cognize, etc., like that. And humans spend far too much time doing that one and not very much time in their external senses.
Right. And if we had been hunter-gatherers, we probably would have a great connection to our senses.
All right, so that means that we need to get back to our roots in that connection, is to stop being in our past and our future and doing so much processing and spend much more time in the here now in our senses. And that the one that we're missing the most is the body, that humans basically shut down the body, yeah, rather than making it vibrantly alive through paying attention to it. Also the eyes and the ears. And so when we come to be here now, we come into sensory awareness. Mm-hmm. And when we're not in the here now, that means that we're in that mind sense organ that is not associated with the present moment. And yeah, the senses on the outside is associated with the stuff that's already in the mind, which is a la the past.
And it puts this screen, like it's like it's nuts to me as I'm coming out of a lifetime of delusion. Like, I just cannot believe the layers and layers of that I put on top of stuff. It's
perhaps it's not so much layers, is that every time that you think of a new layer is just a new mind moment, just something new coming back in. And
Sure.
we tend to get flooded with it because we're in the habit of spending so much of our time in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, so waking up is literally the waking up out of the past, waking up out of our dreams and being in the present moment, in the here now,
Okay.
through our actual senses rather than through the internal senses.
Well, my eyes are starting to get heavy, so I would love to get a better picture of what I'm doing in meditation, because it's feeling pretty tethered right now, um, inconsistent. With
I think possibly the reason for that is because you're reading too much wide variety of literature, and then you're getting confused because you're not able to see the connection. I would go so far as to say I haven't read TMI, but I probably would agree with almost all of it.
Yeah.
Within each context.
Yeah.
But that I can also see that most of the students who practice according to that book wind up not getting the satisfaction that they would expect to get from the book.
Yeah.
That an example would be that people will say, "Oh, I'm at step 6."
Yeah.
And then they write that in Reddit, "Oh, I'm at step 6."
Right.
And then later they figure out that they're not at step 6 right now. They're actually at step 4. And then they feel bad. Where's my step 6?
Yeah.
Okay. And so having too many, you can call them goals,
Yeah.
gets the student goal oriented. That in fact, the goals that we want to meet are not long-term goals. They're very, very short-term goals. In this moment, can you come out of the past and be here now, gladden the mind, take a deep breath, and enjoy the moment? And then later, right now, can you come out of the past, gladden the mind, take a deep breath, become satisfied with this present moment?
Yeah.
That's the practice. Over and over and over again is always coming out of the past into the present moment. And how good or how bad you do this is not necessarily something that should be judged as steps along the path to a goal.
No, that whole business is bollocks. I'm really trying to come out of that. Yeah.
Okay. So be careful about it, because that's a common mistake that Westerners make in these how-to books on Dhamma. And that each book was written by and for the author, not for the student.
It's an interesting viewpoint.
And not only that, but the book cannot say on page 97, "You're on the wrong page.
Yeah.
Stop reading here and go back and read what I wrote on page 6, because that's what you need to hear now."
I had a very... Oh, I'm sorry. It's very dark.
Yes, I've noticed that your lights got turned off.
I had a enlightenment. I had a very whatever, fair but firm lesson from fate, where I found a teacher that was trained by Kuladasa, who wrote The Mind Illuminated in Vancouver, and we talked, and he normally teaches for money, but I was in rehab and stuff, and said, "I'll teach you for free." Had a good lesson. It was helpful. It actually was something that revolutionized my whole life, because he said, was getting distracted by thoughts, like, a lot of them are good thoughts, and you can just be like, "Oh, those were nice thoughts. I enjoyed them, and now I'm back." And that really was great. And then the next time we were scheduled, I had a technology issue. The time after that, I forgot, and I no longer have access to that teacher. So that was...
How did that happen that you lost access to him? I don't understand.
Oh, he said, I apologize for missing, and I
Oh,
said,
you had an appointment that you didn't keep. Okay, all right.
yeah.
Well, so much for appointments then, huh?
I've been a pretty lackadaisical person, unfortunately, and I
Well, I intentionally don't make appointments.
mm, word,
Pardon?
word. I appreciate
Dukkha.
that.
Right. If you make an appointment, somebody's going to miss one, and then everybody's going to feel bad.
I like
The
that.
only reason that there are appointments is because of the delusion time is money. So they're trying to make it their time efficient. Not only that, but if they have appointments on their appointment book, they can see that is cash coming in.
He's a lovely, lovely person. We're just caught up in a I call it the matrix of bullshit. We're all stuck in this matrix of bullshit that
That's
causes
the
us
whole quality, though, of coming out of Dhamma for dollars. Because you said that he was already in that model. Well, if he's teaching you for free, then why is appointments necessary?
He's a busy man.
Why is he busy? I'm not busy.
I don't think it's all up to him. I think he's caught up in a culture that I'd love to take part in changing. Anyhow, I had
Well,
better.
let's do that then. One
Yeah,
person at a time.
I sent you an email. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Just one thing I'll say face to face, such as it is um, I desperately want to prove myself as useful and valuable in this. And part of that is wanting to meet these amazing people that you're talking to. So whatever, but
Well, the skill that you'll need to do that is not the face palming that you're doing right now, but it's the smiling. Work on that gladdening the mind. And when you said that this teacher, I didn't catch his name, actually was saying wholesome thoughts, of course that's the thing. Start having wholesome thoughts. And when you see that you're not having wholesome thoughts, throw them out.
there was
This That's the hindrances. The hindrances are the unappropriate, unwholesome thoughts. And what are thoughts that are worth having right now? Oh, this is nice. Another appropriate thought is, wow, this feels really good. Another appropriate thought is, whoa, what a wonderful day.
I love how you're saying this as you know that you're poking at me. Um, um, I'd like to finish the thought though. I'd love to be really useful, but I'm realizing, like my recovery work is it's not like all of my time, but it's extremely demanding, and there's also a lot of emotions that are coming up. So I don't want to lose my credibility by overcommitting. I have a little bit of time to commit to this, but not much until I finish what I'm doing.
Whatever it is that you think that you're doing, you can smile or you can be miserable. It's up to you.
10-4.
You can remember sati regardless of what you're doing. Even the railroad engineer says, well, I really would like to practice meditation, but I'm too busy driving this train.
Yeah.
The answer is, why can't you drive the train happily?
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever it is you're out there doing with the residence that you're in, do it joyfully.
Dhammarato, that message. Okay, you're saying this because you're not seeing it, so I'll take that under consideration. But I it is starting to penetrate my thick skull. Like I am more and more starting to live that way, think that way.
If I didn't see it penetrating, I wouldn't keep pouring more water on it, now would I?
Oh well, I need to water the garden. I went there yesterday when I was in a mood, and I looked at the little sprouts. They've been there for about a week. And I was like, can't make them go any faster. Just have to keep watering them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This has been wonderful. I'm going to get going. I appreciate you.
We'll see you later.
Salute. Time for tea.